Now let's consider privilege escalation on Linux systems. The key point is enumeration. There are several methods how to elevate privileges. Some of them are related to system and application vulnerabilities. Others are related to misconfiguration. In this video, we will review 4 methods. But first, we need to know something about user rights. If you list the files in directory, you will see something like this. Let's get to know more about this. Access rights are divided by 3 groups: file owner, group of users who also own the file, and other users. What do these users can do with the file? There are only 3 actions. We can read file content, modify it, and execute if it is script or binary file. To better understand this principle, we will consider one example. We have the file script.py. On the left side, we can see access rights of file owner. File owner can read and modify the content, and also he can execute it. Then we have access rights of group of owners. This time, group of owners can only read the script and execute it. And finally, other users can only read the file and nothing else. We know about user access, but how do we know who the owner is? And right here we can see file owner and group of file owners. When you compromise victim's machine, first you need to get more information about privileges of current user. From these commands you will find out username of compromised account and group's membership. sudo-l command will give you information about the commands which user can execute on behalf of other users. Normally this command requires the knowledge of user's password, but for some users password authentication can be disabled. It is also helpful to know which files the user owns and which files are granted with a full access. Probably they can contain useful information, or they can be executable scripts which you can modify. Now let's move to the first method of privilege escalation. In this method, we need to exploit vulnerability in kernel of operating system. And here are the steps to be done. We just need to find out the current version of kernel and find appropriate exploits. Let's see how to do this. The kernel version can be gotten from the following commands. You will also get version of Linux distribution and type of architecture. Having this information, you can try to find the exploit. Kali Linux already contains local copy of exploit database from exploit-db.com. Just use the search exploit command to find what you need. If you don't find anything, you can try other online exploit databases. I would recommend using kernel vulnerability as the last resort to elevate privileges, because you can harm the whole system, and this is not what you need as a pen tester. The second way to elevate privileges is to exploit vulnerable applications running as root. The steps are almost the same as we considered before, but in this case we need to find a vulnerable application. To find any application or service running as root, you can execute one of the following commands. The first 2 commands display running processes. The second 2 commands display listening network services. For example, it can be Samba process. After you found desired application, you need to get its version to find suitable exploit. Most applications support option V to display version of software. Another interesting technique is sudo rights abusing. But what is sudo? Sudo is a program used to execute programs on behalf of other users. For example, you are going to install favorite game, but you have no sufficient rights to do this. So you just apply sudo command to install the game on behalf of admin user. But this is possible only if you are allowed to use given command. So how do we know which user is allowed to use sudo command? All sudo privileges are managed by this file. It contains all instructions to do when sudo command is called. The file can be edited by root user. To edit the file, it is strictly recommended to use the sudo command. To better understand instructions in the file, we will review two examples. By default, all Linux distributions have the following entry. What does it mean? On the left side, there is a user account who is going to use a sudo command. Then we have a host name on which user wants to run the command. It can be local or remote host. Here we have username and group. We are going to run the command on behalf of user and group listed in the section. And finally, there is a list of commands to be run as the user in the brackets. So that means that root account can execute any commands on any machines as any user and any group. Let's review another example. This time we can see that user task can execute only one command, and this command is find. Besides, he can run the command only as root on any machine. You can define a list of commands and create flexible privileges for different users and groups. How can user check his privileges? It's very easy. Just enter the following command. In most cases, it is necessary to enter user password. But as I mentioned before, password authentication can be disabled. So, we know about sudo rights, but how can it help us to elevate privileges? Well, the following commands can do that. You can download the list of commands with example in the end of this video. Right now, let's consider a demo. Let's imagine that we compromised a remote machine. First, we need to know basic information about current user. You can see that my current account is student and I am not a root. Now I want to see my sudo privileges. As you can see, student account can run 3 commands as root. Well, let's try last command. We can see the content of the file. That's great, but if I enter exclamation mark, I will be able to run arbitrary command. Let's enter shell command. You can see the command prompt is changed. Let's type who am I and id commands. And bingo, we've got root. To make sure that I'm really root, let me read shadow file. So you can see that misconfigured sudo rights can lead to privilege escalation. Now I would like to show you how wildcard in conjunction with some commands can also lead to elevated privileges. This technique is called wildcard injection. But first, let's find out what wildcard is and where it is used. Wildcard is a character or a set of characters used to replace some symbols in the file name. If you are familiar with Linux, you already used asterisk or question mark in situations when a huge amount of files was to be copied or deleted. Let's consider one example. We need to copy 4 files with the same extensions to the document folder. How can we do it? We can just list all the files in one command line, or we can use wildcard. All the files have the same extensions, so we can replace file names with wildcard. In this case, the command looks shorter. So this is the way how the wildcards are used. When we know what the wildcard is and how it is used, it is time to get to know how wildcard injection works. This technique is based on one feature of Linux shell. When you create a file whose name starts with a hyphen, shell interprets it as a command line option. Let's review one example to better understand this technique. On the picture you can see that we have 4 text files in one folder. Now let's execute ls command with asterisk wildcard to recursively display all the files. We can see the document folder contains some files. Everything looks okay for now. Now I'm going to create a file with the name -ahl. These options are used with the ls command to display hidden files and file attributes. You can see that new file is well displayed after single ls command is executed. And here everything looks okay for now. Now I'm going to execute ls command with the asterisk wildcard to recursively display all the files. And look what we have now. Our file with name -ahl is not displayed. Instead, we can see file attributes and also hidden files. This happened because the shell considered newly created file name as the option of ls command. That is why it displayed what we didn't expect. Please compare two outputs. In both cases, we executed the same command. But in the second case, we just simply created one file, and thanks to given file, we could easily manipulate output of the command. Remember that command can be executed by user with higher privileges, and with some file manipulations, we can change result. And of course, you are interested which commands can be used to elevate privileges. And here is the list of some commands. Now it's time for demo. I'm going to use the tar command to run backdoor with the root privileges. This command has a lot of interesting options. We will try 2 of them. And these options I'm going to use. Let's imagine a situation when root user wants to archive the content of the current folder with the following command. Please note that wildcard is used to archive the whole content. It can be done manually or automatically with a cron job. There is a backdoor file which must be launched by user with elevated privileges. And this file we are going to run. Now I'm going to create 2 files with the names of above mentioned options. You can see that both files are created. I already created a listener on Kali machine. So on the right side I have attacker's machine, and on the left one I have a victim's machine. Now I'm going to execute tar command as root user. And on the right side you can see that our backdoor was successfully executed, and we have a remote shell. As you can see, I am root user. Great! By the way, archive was also successfully created on the compromised machine. Such commands can be run manually or automatically. That is why it is important to check scripts and cron jobs on the compromised machine.